And so the initial feeling was relief. And then as it went on, you know, as the grief process started, that like relief turned to anger. Because I was angry at him. Because what he'd done was, for me, and I'm confident I could talk for others, but I won't. For me, what he'd done is caused 18 years of like shit. And then just been like, I'm out of here, see you later. And died of a heart attack like that. One summer night in August 2006. And all that shit he'd caused in the family, all that like fucking just like trauma and that embarrassment, that shame I felt for having like a drunk for a dad. Like, I didn't tell any of my mates, man. How can you... Like, one time my dad came back and he'd shit his pants, he was that drunk. That's quite funny. It's funny if you're a fucking fresher. You know, it's funny if you're like fucking, you know, 16 and drinking for the first time. It's not funny for a man, a father of 3 kids. Maybe it is a little bit. But he did shit that just made me feel so... just like, all right, that's going down there and never being looked at again. Like, so many times shit happened like that. And then he died. He just died. He just went. And when your dad dies, you're not supposed to feel relief. You're not supposed to feel like a sense of like, oh, thank God. You're supposed to be fucking distraught and sad, and I wasn't. And so that relief, it changed into anger. So I got, for like my 20s, I couldn't even think about him because I was that angry with him. I was so angry with him for just fucking off like that. Like, who the fuck does he think he is? He's fucked up, man. Caused all this shit in all the family, all my life, and then just fucks off. He's like, oh, peace, I'm out. You're not going to get a chance to resolve any of that shit with me because I'm gone. And so, in my 20s, I don't know, man. I just didn't really think about him. Didn't really care. All I wanted to do was get away from home, go to America, go to London, just get away, man. Just get away. Because he hung over everything. His negativity, his toxicity, the kind of like shit he would create in the... No, it's horrible. So I had to get away. But he was my dad, and I loved him. He was my dad, and I loved him. And I love him still. So, ...2019, when I decided to get to therapy, that was the start of my journey into forgiving him. Because he deserves it. He deserves forgiveness. Because he had a really hard life. He came here as like an immigrant in like the 60s. And I spoke to his brother about this. His second youngest brother. And him and my dad were so tight. And he was telling me how they came into Heathrow in like, I think like the late 50s or early 60s from India. And they're just literally wearing like shorts and t-shirts, and they came and it was fucking freezing. And he came here as an immigrant, and he had a dad who was a drunk, and his dad would like beat them. And his mum had mental health problems that weren't diagnosed, and he had to deal with it. So he is the oldest of 4 brothers. So it was the 4 of them, and he had to raise them. He told me stories about like my dad's brother told me stories about him, like my dad like being the leader of the group growing up of my brothers and the wider group in Dudley, and told me all these like fascinating stories about my dad that I just didn't fucking see, man. I didn't see him in this light, like him being like the leader and the cool guy and the fucking one that was like everyone looked up to, like all of them. And so I reached out to my dad's brothers, some of my dad's friends that my mum had numbers for, and I just heard all these fucking stories, man, of my dad just being a fucking G, you know, on the streets of Dudley. And just being the one who was like the dude, man, the dude. And it was so nice to hear that, because I didn't see that side of him. I didn't see him be that person. And so hearing that was just so lovely. It was so lovely. And it got me thinking that he didn't do this shit. He didn't drink and didn't be a cunt and a nasty bastard because it was against us. He did it because he had fucking pain in his heart, man. He had pain in his soul that no one had taught him how to like deal with, how to like overcome. You know, no one had helped him. Like his dad beating him, his dad being a drunk, his being an immigrant. You know, stories that he'd actually told me, and my uncle told me as well, of them being like crazily racially abused by the skinheads in the 70s. All this shit he went through, man. And you know what? He was always there. Drunk, cunt, whatever. He was always there, man. He didn't bail. He didn't like give up. He was just fighting so hard against these, like, I guess, this is how I think about it, and I don't know for sure, and I'll never know because I never talked to him again. But all these demons, man, that were just fucking eating him away, eating him alive, man, every day, that he just didn't have the tools or the chance or the ability or whatever, or the opportunity to like be okay with. And the biggest thing I wish, man, out of everything, is that I could have a conversation with my dad now, with this mindset I've got, just fucking pure love for him, man, and forgiveness for all the shit he put us through, man. Like, no, like man, like people go through way worse, and I'm not fucking, you know, I don't rate fucking suffering on a scale, man. Suffering is suffering, and all that shit we went through, man. He just needed someone who fucking just could get through to him. He genuinely loved him. And I'm not saying I'm fucking Superman and I could have fixed him, but man, I would have listened, man. Because it wasn't fair what he went through. It wasn't fair that he had to go through that shit. But he did. And he did. And he did his best. And I guess that's the one thing I've come to fucking accept about my dad. Was he wasn't perfect, man. And he wasn't perfect in any stretch. You know, when I compared him to my friend's dad, growing up. No, man, no comparison. But he was doing the best he could. The best he could muster with all that pain in his heart, man. You know, and he loved his mom. He loved his mom so much. And when he married my mom, an Indian man and a white woman, his dad like kicked off, and he couldn't see his mom as much as he wanted to. And he had that on his plate, as well as being an adult and married and having kids, that he couldn't see his mom. And so he just held all this stuff inside, man. And I've only in the past few years come to have an appreciation of that stuff, that he went through that. And this is going to go a bit over. Like, I wanted this to be 20 minutes, but there's a couple of other stories I want to tell. The first is, like, when I was 14, me and my dad spent the summer making this rabbit hutch for my guinea pig and my rabbit. It was great, man. He brought all this fucking metal home from work, these big like metal kind of cage things that he fucking welded them on, man. He was like worked in a factory, brought home this like welder's mask and welded them on. And that was probably like one of the happiest summers and happiest memories I've got. And like I say, there weren't many happy memories with him, but that was one. Just that summer, man, handing him like the metal poles, the cages, building a little ramp. It was like this deluxe fucking rabbit hutch, man. Top floor, sleeping area, living area, ramp down to some outdoor exercise area. It was fucking amazing. And it was such a happy memory with him. And then the second one is when I think I was probably like 15 or 16, I don't know. But my Crohn's was really bad. And I had to be put on this liquid diet. So only liquids for 6 weeks. It was a fucking struggle. And I made it into 2 weeks into it. And these drinks I had to have were sweet. They didn't come in savoury flavours. just sweet, like high calorie little drinks. And so I'd drink these for every meal. And it got to 2 weeks in, man, and all I wanted, this little scared 16-year-old who was just so embarrassed and ashamed of drinking these drinks because everyone was taking the piss out of him at school, didn't know what to do, still was in pain because the drinks weren't helping. And I couldn't take it, and I just wanted a packet of salt and vinegar crisps. That salty goodness, that's what I wanted. And my mum and dad were like, no, son, no, you've got to stay on this diet. You've got to stay on this diet. And I couldn't. And I had a meltdown, like a 16-year-old having a tantrum like a 5-year-old, because I just couldn't cope anymore. Couldn't cope with the people at school taking the piss. Couldn't cope with the pain. Couldn't cope without having that like salt and vinegar salty goodness. And so I had a massive meltdown, sobbed, cried, ran upstairs to the top bunk of my bedroom, the top bunk of the bed, and the bedroom I shared with my brother. And I was on there just crying, man. And you know when you've had a tantrum or a meltdown, you're exhausted. And I was probably exhausted anyway from just all the stress. And so I'm on there, a top bunk, and my dad comes up. And all he did was put his arm around me, because obviously standing up, he could reach the top bunk. And he said something like, "It's going to be okay." And that made me just sob even more, man. And I remember feeling his, like, obviously I'd like some prepubescent smooth ass cheeks. I remember feeling his beard. He had a his stubbly beard I felt on my cheek. And I can still feel that now, man. Like that feeling of my dad's love, like there on me. And him just wanting his son to be okay, and it was lovely. And those memories, man, they're beautiful memories. Because I knew he cared, and I knew he loved us. He just, because I had this shit, man, had these demons, had this other stuff that wouldn't allow those feelings to, like, be the dominant ones. It was others that, like, that had that role.